This session I'm very excited to look at. We're going to really try and get under the skin of what Live Group have called their digital twin strategy or platform, which enables you to take your event and put it into the digital space, or indeed run a physical event alongside a digital event, mix those up as much as you need to do to meet with the current climate of COVID-19 and the challenges that we have as a result. We've got an excellent lineup of speakers who are going to take us through all aspects of that. I'm not going to say too much about those right now, but I am delighted that I'm joined today, or indeed the host of today really, is Toby Lewis. Toby, you're the CEO of Live Group. Tell us a bit about what you hope the audience are going to get out of today.
Yeah, well, we have the previous webinars we've done have been really focusing on key areas, and today we are extending those key areas into the individual parts. And what I hope people get is a flavour of each different element. I encourage you to ask questions. Please ask questions. There's a box at the bottom of each video that when you watch them, we can decipher who you're asking those questions to by the time they come in. But we are actually using the videos to go through the process that we would ask and work with a client to go through when we're taking a virtual event through the digital world. And by saying that, first up is Bruce. And Bruce is talking very much about the architecture. And we put the architecture up front, because if you don't do this and you don't pair your whole event back to first principles thinking, and you go ahead without a well-informed architecture, it's a bit like booking a venue for a live event when you don't know how many workshops you're going to do or how many people are coming. Who would do that?
No one does that.
So without further ado, and please people watching, do ask questions throughout. We've got our lovely panel who are going to join us afterwards. First up is Bruce Rose.
Let's talk about our evolved event architectures. Our architectures are delivery blueprints for an event, replacing a rigid agenda with a flexible content approach that works to achieve your objectives no matter what happens in the wider world. We've shown samples of these architectures in some of our previous videos. Now let's take a closer look at how they're created. I can't show you the process for building the architecture for an entire event. I want to keep this video runtime under a day, so instead let's focus on a single part of an agenda. Welcome to my flagship event, ContentCon, here to relay the importance of great content in a busy world. After doing some first principles thinking on the objectives for my event, I've settled on two key things I want to achieve. 1. Motivate people to make bold and interesting content decisions in their work. And 2. Provide a support network so that people can learn from content experts and have their questions answered. I also have a hidden third aim. Number 3. Build the brand of ContentCon to grow my audience year on year. These objectives may seem simple, but they'll be things I check each of my architectural decisions against as I build a delivery plan. Now, normally I'd build an architecture based around our 4 pillars of digital events: objectives, audience, content, and legacy. But for the sake of simplicity in this video, this architecture will be based on just objectives. Let's look at one aspect of the event, the opening plenary. It's a feature of most events, and it's there for an excellent reason: to get people excited for the conference and to set the tone for the rest of the content to follow. The opening plenary supports my event objectives, so there's no reason to remove it. Let's lock it in. Here's that content block as it would exist for a traditional event. I see a single speaker taking the stage and delivering it to an in-room audience. For my architecture, this is my base scenario. Now, let's build out the architecture by bringing in the elements that digital technology allows. This expands the scope of my thinking. Instead of just planning for the event phase, I can introduce pre-event and post-event activities. I know that to motivate people, I need to be addressing issues relevant to their lives. So one thing I will add in the pre-event phase is an engagement question to get a sense of their priorities. Post-event, I want an evaluation of how my content landed. This will give me insight into how I can improve my event for next year. For the event phase, I want to expand the reach of my talk. Exposing a wider audience to my content will help the reputation of ContentCon grow. So let's add a live stream to sit in parallel with my talk. While my presenter gives their talk on stage, this expanded audience will watch remotely. I don't want them to feel like second-class attendees, so I'll add some audience engagement technology to let them get involved. This idea of expansion of content, audience, and engagement forms the core of our evolved event approach. What you see on screen is an expanded event, but one which is still vulnerable. Let's make it more resilient. Our opening plenary speaker is perhaps the largest point of failure. We know that we can shift the audience online. However, if our speaker cannot attend, say because of a lockdown, we need to account for that in our architecture. We therefore add a new, partially disrupted column for the shape of our event. Here, the speaker is brought in remotely, speaking to an audience that's both in-room and remote. We can also think of a scenario of additional disruption where the speaker may not speak at all and therefore needs to be replaced. In this scenario, we must communicate to the audience what's happened pre-event. In addition, new content avenues open up. We may wish to give the original speaker a platform to share their views either pre or post-event, depending on when we can record them. We can expand our disruption scenarios in line with a risk analysis for the event, that ultimately will reach a point of maximum disruption. Here, the physical elements of the event cannot go ahead at all, and so we have to consider a virtual-only approach. Our architecture changes accordingly. The core messages of the opening plenary are now hosted pre-event as a welcome introduction to the show, with the live session being used for questions and audience interaction. This changes the shape of the conference while still working to achieve its objectives. The end result is an adaptive plan, ready to change as the world does. From our expanded base scenario through levels of disruption to a potential endpoint where large aspects of the original event cannot take place. No matter what happens, a curated, intelligent approach is adopted, with sessions that have been built to achieve an event's objectives from the ground up. What you've seen is a single session, a single agenda item, and worked only to an event's objectives. What we want to create for you is an entire event plan based around our 4 pillars. I hope you found this interesting, and thank you for watching.
Thank you to Bruce for sharing that with us, giving us a real idea of how a digital twin platform might be put together. I don't know about you, but I can't wait to go to Content Con. Sounds brilliant, Bruce. I need to find out where to register for this event. We've got some questions coming in, so that's excellent. Thank you very much to those of you that are submitting those. And if you have any thoughts, questions, comments, please make sure you send them in. We'll make sure we put those to Bruce and indeed the rest of the speakers who are here waiting to speak to you very shortly. Toby, so the digital twin concept gives you that opportunity to really rethink your event from literally from the very first principle. I mean, I'm involved in lots of events and event agendas, and it's amazing to me that we only now is it amazing to me that you just automatically assume you're going to be in a venue, everyone's going to be there, we'll have some coffee, and actually it needn't be.
It's a shame that it took this pandemic to give people the excuse to really look over their event with a fine-tooth comb. As you know, the digital twin was actually created for us to be able to reduce the event effect on the environment. So that's what it was originally produced for. We now are using it to quickly transfer events into the digital arena in this pandemic. But yes, it's a good example of how a client can really look to strip back their event and put it back together again in the best way for the audience. Of course, part of Bruce's video there was the ability to flex and change your event as time progresses, and because we don't really know what situations we might be facing 3, 6 months, certainly a year down the line, the digital twin is very adaptable. And moving on to the next video, you'll see you can actually the way we cost these up is with an amount of flexibility. So in Marcus's video, he clearly explains what a base cost is, what it takes to set the thing up, but then the variations in costs that we can provide each client so they know what they're looking at based on different scenarios. So I'm quite excited to see that. Can we play that video now?
Hello, I'm Marcus. I'm the Commercial Director at the Live Group. I've been here for just over 4 years, but I've worked in the events industry for 20 plus years. My role is to introduce new clients to Live Group and to ensure our existing clients get the very best from us. A big part of that is about showing where we add value as an agency, and one of those areas is digital events. Today, I'm going to be looking at how the digital twin architecture is moved from concept to reality. And the first step in that journey is creating a budget. At Live Group, we like clear budgets, budgets without shocks or nasty surprises, and importantly, budgets that deliver a strong return on investment and objectives. The great thing about digital events is that they're scalable. There's a solution for every budget. And so, from the outset, we'll work to establish some guiding principles that will help shape our planning and our approach to your brief. We'll work with you to understand the must-have elements, to understand your production values, your program structure, and of course, everything else that may impact cost. We do this to ensure the solution we create is the right one for you and the right one for your budget. When we bring to life the architecture, it all starts with budget modeling. It's the first step in making it real. Typically, budgets are made up of 3 primary elements: pre-event costs, delivery costs, and post-event costs. A budget for a digital twin is slightly different to other budgets, as it contains both fixed and variable costs. The variable costs relate to various delivery pathways for the live element. These are unique scenarios outlined in the architecture and will have been identified as part of the discovery phase. They are mapped out by our experts based on your brief, your program, and your unique requirements. If you want to learn more about that process, check out episode 3 on our YouTube channel. And whilst you're there, give us a like and subscribe. So looking at this in further detail, we need to cost each of the delivery pathways, the scenarios. In this example, 5 different pathways have been identified, A through E. Each scenario has a different cost implication. For example, Scenario B might be based on using a professional studio with a fully virtual audience. In contrast, Scenario D might be based on a hybrid event with a mix of live and remote delegates. Each needs its own budget. By mapping out each pathway and creating an individual budget, we're able to provide certainty in uncertain times and avoid those nasty surprises. With this completed, we're able to create a budget range with an upper and a lower limit, which covers all scenarios. We then bolt on the pre and post event costs, which are always fixed to give a complete budget. Our approach offers our clients certainty from a cost perspective, but also flexibility from a delivery perspective. As we move through the planning process, we're constantly monitoring what is possible across an ever-changing landscape. As the event approaches, we're able to select the most appropriate scenario, finalize the budget, and deliver your program. The costs are then fixed and the project's delivered. Our approach enables us to be nimble, responsive, and flexible. It offers our clients certainty that regardless of the situation, the event can go ahead. And most importantly, that the event can go ahead in its best possible form without compromise and without surprise. Well, I hope that was useful and of interest. Why not put us to the test? Get in touch, let's chat through your brief and find out what your architecture looks like. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Marcus, for sharing some of the cost models with us, starting to give us an idea of how a digital twin is costed. However, I can't help noticing that you didn't actually say anything about any numbers in there. And I imagine there's a whole bunch of people watching this right now who just want to get an idea on, is this a ridiculously expensive thing to do? Or is it really cheap? Or what is it? So, Toby, how much does it cost?
Thanks for that, Kieran. Yeah, Fabio, Marcus, the slippery fish, managed to get through without actually giving us a cost. Look, I could pose the question to you, how much is a meal? Or how much is an event to run? You're talking about so many different complexities, lots of different avenues that you could go down, venue hire, production values. it's a difficult thing. What I can tell you is clients at the moment are assuming this is quite a cheap thing to do. And actually at its lowest form, if you want to record through your webcam and upload it onto YouTube, you can do that.
How much is that?
It's as much as you want to spend. I don't know, Bruce might be able to tell us later. The thing is, we are talking about real engagement with audience, and we're talking about content developing, and we're talking about project management, and we're talking about helping your speakers translate what they say to a real audience to a virtual audience. And that's what Jim's going to talk about after this next video. These things aren't cheap. Pre-recording isn't cheap. Sending camera kits to people isn't cheap. I think there is a real learning curve from the industry that, you know, we've got to look at events differently. You're not booking a venue now. You're not having travel and accommodation expenses. You're not buying food for everybody.
What percentage of a normal budget would be the physical event?
The venue cost is nearly always about 50% of your traditional
just
event.
for the actual venue.
Add on AV and food and beverages and all that stuff.
Travel. And
you know, you've spent 60 to 65% of your budget before you've even thought about content. Now what we're saying to clients is, let's talk about your content. What do you want to tell your audience? What does your audience want to hear? How do they want to hear it? Now, and I'm kind of, it's a very difficult question to ask, how much the things cost. But I would say a simple platform with a pre-registration site, you should be looking anything between £2,000 and £5,000 for your base cost.
Yes.
Upload videos onto there, to pre-record a video professionally with a decent camera kit, £1,000 each. But you know, these are the base production costs. Where the cost that a value that we bring is the content provision. Going back to Bruce's first principles, really allowing clients to understand what they want to achieve, and then we can provide costs to make that happen. Bringing value is what we do. We don't want to take money if we're not bringing value back.
And the project management is the next video, isn't it?
Yeah, so I mean, Becky's video is an interesting one, and we have seen a seismic shake-up in the event industry as a whole, where not only companies are trying to, but actual event professionals are trying to pivot their skills into a digital world. It's good to know, and I won't steal Becky's thunder, but actually the two things aren't hugely different. There's still a massive amount of logistics to be done, and an event professional still has a huge amount of work. So listen to this, guys.
Hi, I'm one of the senior project managers here at the Live Group, and my role is to manage complex logistics. It's what I do best. Contingency planning and thinking about the what-ifs comes naturally to me. And in the current climate, it's important to plan for the unexpected, as it's even more critical. Now, I've been managing events with a digital layer, and yes, it's more moving parts and more plates to keep on spinning, but that's why I'm here. I can assure you that the fundamentals of the planning process don't change. We have phase one, the kickoff phase, where my team and yours align and we come up with an event strategy with a digital twin. We start paying more attention to the audience, both the physical and the virtual, and then we look at our speakers. Now, they're going to need a little bit more care and attention because for some, not all, may find it daunting transferring from a physical audience to a virtual audience. And then on to phase two, the project planning phase. And this is where your all-important project plan really comes into play, and you're going to rely on it more than ever. It's about setting key milestones and knowing when decisions need to be made. Decisions which impact the physical event, the virtual, or the hybrid of the two. Understanding your venues and your supply chains, their booking conditions or cancellation terms will give you the flexibility to move course should you wish. And then we're into phase three, the delivery phase. Now, events with a digital element require a little bit more day-to-day management. Keeping on top of all the usual project teams, that's yours and mine. Being aware of the wider world, government advice and restrictions, not just for UK, but all around the world. Knowing and informing you when I need you to make key decisions and understanding the knock-on effect of these. Listening to your audience. Our platform gives them a voice and we need to be ready to react to that at any given time. But most importantly, we've got to stop thinking of an event as a 1 to 3 day thing the moment I walk into a venue or click the live stream page. Because for us, an event is that first touch point with your audience. So there's a few things to bear in mind there, but that's why I'm here, to confidently support you in making these key decisions at the most critical of times so that you can simply focus on what's most important to your organisation. To make you feel empowered to make impactful key decisions with the most up-to-date information at your fingertips. Now, I understand that many will see a digital twin as a load more logistics and something else to add to your to-do list, but I encourage you to see it as an enabler. Embrace the new normal. I know we're missing the way it was, but if you need any support, you know where we are. I look forward to seeing your questions below, and thank you for watching.
Thank you, Becky. Really helpful to give us a bit of a flavour of what's involved in planning one of these events. And I'm guessing the project management around a digital twin event is more complicated than a standard one. I guess whilst you don't have physical delegates, or maybe you have delegates and the digital side, but you've got a huge amount of things to think about as you're mitigating risk. So Toby, I guess the digital twin concept, the architecture, as Bruce was sharing with us, relies on you making a decision, a milestone point along your plan for example, if you're going to have a high quality studio on standby in case speakers are unable to attend your event. I guess that is all part of the project plan and indeed many other things.
Absolutely. Project plans are differing slightly than they used to because, yeah, in a traditional event you do have a day and a place where you're going, and so there are more flexible project plans with different routes that we are producing for clients to understand, but it's understandable. And I think as the new norm, I hate saying these buzz terms, but as the new norm comes, it will be commonplace for this to happen. Great stuff. Next up, we have our video showing our platform, and really this is the video. This is the place where most events will begin, and what we've done is we've combined our award-winning DMS system with our virtual streaming platform to provide this new bit of software. So
and what is that this is going to be the audience view. So what do your delegates, audience members see, feel, and experience on an event? Exactly. Fantastic. Don't forget to send your questions in, everybody.
Roll VT.
When running your event with a successful digital strategy, your platform is everything. Let us show you how our system can bring your events to the next level. With Live Group, you won't be tearing your hair out with poor online editors. Let our team take care of everything, building a site that you cannot wait to show your delegates. It starts with registration. We understand that the security of your event comes first, and that you need a platform you can trust. Our sites can be set in a public registration mode, allowing anyone to join. Alternatively, we can work with data exported from your CRM, making events invite only. Whatever method you opt for, you remain in complete control of your data at all times. On the site, people will be invited to complete their profiles, signing up for sessions and building a networking profile that will last the lifetime of the event. Once registered, delegates will be directed to the homepage. Every site we create is tailored to your needs and customized for your brand. Content is placed at a premium. We pay attention to the user journey, with your most exciting and relevant highlights placed strategically to get your audience exploring. As your delegates scroll down, they'll be able to pick up more highlights, taking in your speakers and, if you have them, your exhibitors and sponsors. If you wish to have options for some delegates to attend the event physically, they'll be directed to their joining instructions. Those attending virtually will get helpful reminders for when to tune in to the live show. The agenda page lets your audience plan their event experience, whether physical or virtual. Visibility is key here, with multiple days and streams easily explored through the click of a button. Virtual delegates can highlight sessions of particular interest to them, receiving a notification when they're about to go live. Speaker highlights let your audience discover more about who's giving each talk, and networking signposts ease your audience into the pre-event networking experience. That networking, it's powered by our Peer Hub. Here, people can see who else is attending the event and what interests or topics they want to connect over. It's an environment that encourages discovery and collaboration, with search tools enabling users to find who they're looking for in an instant. Profiles are self-created, with instant messaging available when a user is online. Rather than limit connections to the platform, the Live Group team can bridge in professional networking sites, such as LinkedIn, to enable delegates to connect long after the event has ended. We know that planting the seeds of discussions pre-event can make all the difference to engagement when your event goes live. Forum discussions let people share their views in a controlled environment, connecting with other delegates over interesting topics and debates. Rather than go into the live event unprepared, delegates can get familiar with the topics, and organisers can see which areas are resonating with their audience. Debates can be set in advance by a content manager or created by each delegate, with a moderation system throughout. Forums can provide valuable insight from your vocal community, while people who may not wish to comment can still thumbs up content they like, helping to crowdsource the very best discussions. Within discussions themselves, users can highlight interesting responses or post direct replies. Each activity is linked to a user's account, meaning that a thoughtful comment can be the gateway to new networking opportunities. This same level of interaction and discovery is brought to the content library. Here, all of your content, from videos to documents, can be searched, viewed, commented, liked, or saved for later. Of course, you may wish to keep this section live across multiple events, allowing your audience to access even more interesting and evolving content across your entire portfolio. The speakers section lets your talent shine. This is a space for your key speakers to take pride of place, while the same search functionality is brought across to make finding interesting talks a breeze for your attendees. Detailed profiles provide more information on each speaker and when their talk is happening. If desired, the same connection tools can be enabled to help your delegates connect with speakers well before the event goes live. Exhibitors and sponsors are the lifeblood of any event, and our platform provides them with ample opportunities to get their message out to the audience pre, during, and post-event. Event supporters are showcased in an easy-to-navigate gallery, which lets users see the names of the exhibitors and the specialisms they're bringing to the table. Each exhibitor or sponsor receives a dedicated microsite, a branded environment which lets people interact with their content, all just a click away. Multimedia, downloads, links, and live chat emulate the experience of a physical event, and a defined next steps area gives your supporters an easy way to drive value from your event. All of these elements together build the live event page, where for the virtual audience your content will be broadcast over your event day. Here it's all about content and interaction. Our live streams are handled by our world-class production teams, taking your live speakers, slides, and other content and building them into a TV quality broadcast. Accompanying these streams are live chat, helping your audience connect in the moment, as well as our award-winning interactive tech, letting speakers post questions on the fly and gather insights to elevate their talks. With support for as many streams as you need, virtual delegates can easily navigate through the different rooms, engaging in each chat and sparking conversations with speakers and other attendees in real time, private to that stream. We understand that this is a pioneering approach, underpinning your digital strategy and bringing audiences together, whether they be physical or virtual. That's why our team is always on hand to assist. If delegates have questions or need help, our FAQs and contact pages provide an easy and convenient way to get in touch with our support teams, ready to answer their questions and ensure they're ready to get involved. Excited? We hope so. Send us an email at hello@livegroup.co.uk and we'll get you started.
Thank you. Thanks very much indeed, Bruce, taking us through there the delegate experience. So starting to bring to life what this might look like, one of the options indeed for how it might look for your delegates. We have seen some questions coming in, so Toby and I are going to be quiet and try and get on to the next video, and then we'll deal with as many questions as we can at the end. So Bruce has shared the delegate experience, and now we have Jim Steele, who's going to share with us some thoughts about the speaker experience, which is pretty different. Jim.
Hi, I'm Jim Steele. I'm a business speaker, and I'm going to give a speaker's perspective on what it's like delivering in this new digital environment we find ourselves in. I was reading a LinkedIn post by a friend recently from London Business School, and it started with the line, "I've just been disrupted. Overnight, I've become Blockbuster, Kodak, and the diesel engine." And it sounded uncomfortably familiar. You know, for many of us, the world has tilted, and we've had to flex, regroup. Popular word right now is pivot. So I tooled up with Adobe Connect, Zoom, Microsoft Teams, to name a few. I was all set, ready to go, or so I thought. I mean, how hard could it be, right? Talking to a screen as opposed to a room full of actual people and the pressure of camera, lights, action. Well, let's just say that the learning curve has been surprisingly steep. Pivot doesn't even come close. So in the old world, right, as a speaker, you know, you would utilize the group dynamic. You know, you'd factor it in. You know, as an example, studies would suggest that people rarely actually laugh out loud when they're on their own. And yet, if 25 out of 100 people laugh at an audience, at a conference, the energy of the room shifts, right? People laugh because people are laughing. The behavioral patterns change with a group. And this is perhaps the biggest challenge, which hit me like a truck, the total lack of moment-to-moment feedback. You know, presentation mode switched on, can't see anyone. The mute all's activated, can't hear anyone. It was like presenting into a vacuum. You know, how am I doing? Did my point land? Are they with me? How's the energy in the room? You know, is there anyone even still in the room, right? You know, it created a really unusual pressure. I mean, as a speaker, you know, pressure kind of goes with the territory. You have to deliver. But not knowing where you are, whether you're on track or off track with the room, you know, it takes away the option to adjust your approach. Equally important, but less obvious, is that there was also pressure on the audience. A room full of people creates a natural tension. You know, unfamiliar surroundings, the group of people that, you know, some you don't even know that well. The fight or flight response triggers amber alerts just in case. You know, what does today have in store for me? You know, who's the speaker? What are they going to do? You know, will it involve me? You know, it was a dynamic tension that if the speaker appreciated it and used it respectfully, it would help them build a rapport, you know, and gain trust from the group. And that trust would then allow the speaker to challenge the room, take them outside their comfort zones, you know, safely, but with the positive intention of leaving the delegates, you know, stronger, smarter, or better for having had the experience. And if you paid attention, if you noticed the audience reaction, their facial expressions, whether their shoulders have dropped a bit or not, you knew where you stood, you know, and how far you could go. But now the rules of the game have changed, right? Now as someone logs in from their attic, at any point they can choose to switch off their mic, their camera, right? They can virtually leave the room. Right? In fact, they decide when it's time for a coffee break. And if you're the speaker with hundreds of people dialed in, there's a good chance you won't even know. So how do we take a speech to a remote platform? You know, and as lockdown eases, you know, to what I suspect will be an amalgamation of small live audiences, you know, socially distanced, remote webinars, you know, remote viewers tuned in with a visual link, others tuned in perhaps digitally. You know, in fact, before I even answer the question, I have to say, you know, even with 25 years or more speaking to groups large and small, I've only had 6 weeks doing this, where there's nobody even in the room, right? So I come at this as someone who's, you know, excited by the challenge to change, whilst at the same time still slightly dazed and confused by what that actually means. That said, I am confident that people are people, and if you as a speaker could engage an audience in the literal room, you can do so in a virtual one, right? Yes, there'll be some adjustments. So it seems to me that there are 3 areas of delivery where the speaker can add more value and enhance the remote experience. You know, as the speaker, it used to be that the majority of the action happened at the live event, right? To my knowledge, you know, pre-communication was used for informing delegates of upcoming agendas, allocating, you know, table groups, or deciding what breakout they're going to attend. Certainly a minimal contribution from the speaker. And then after the event, aside from appearing on the feedback form, about the same amount of involvement, right? Not much. Now, if the speaker's going to really add value, right, and earn their right at the table, I believe we've got to provide more of a blended learning pathway that connects, you know, 3 touch points before, during, and after the event. Specifically, what can we do? Well, you know, pre-event, we've got to excite delegates. During the event, we've got to engage them, and then post-event, we have to embed the learning. In the old world, it would have seemed odd, right, to be contacted by the guest speaker in the lead up to an event. Now, I feel it's not only relevant, it's also congruent, seen as the mode of communication, whether pre, during, or post, it's pretty much the same. You know, it's delivered to the delegate on a screen whilst they're sat at their desk. And as a result, I really feel that, you know, as speakers, we have an opportunity and a responsibility to support each of those three stages in order to have a more sustainable impact. So, excite. You know, we can start exciting delegates by beginning the learning process way earlier, before the event. And now I've been providing short promo videos to introduce myself, the content, proposed benefits, right? Provocative little sound bites to whet the appetite, provoke them to consider their opinions and views and prime them, so that when they arrive in the event, they're engaged, you know, they're ready for discussions, ready to kind of test some ideas, test some observations on the day. So engage. You know, in the past, you know, we could generate a successful outcome by creating a tremendous amount of energy in the room, surprising people with some insightful messages, you know, put in a few energizing activities and the odd amusing anecdote. Now, you know, I really believe that we should give people the content beforehand, like I say, and then surprise them with the process of how we explore it on the day. It's as if we need to build some of that trust that I mentioned, you know, earlier on in the lead up, by both reassuring them that, yes, it's another Zoom session potentially, but it's not any old session. It's something to look forward to specifically. And also the way in which we explore ideas has to change. You know, we now have a greater opportunity to involve everyone in the room. You know, back in the day, the extroverts were always happy to jump in with both feet, time for an energizer, you know, or volunteer to help make a, you know, demonstrate a point. The introverts, sometimes not quite their style. But now, if you've participated in the build-up and generated some positive expectation and anticipation, there's going to be 100 faces on 100 screens, all personality types feeling relaxed and ready to join in. And maybe the biggest opportunity to add value lies in the third phase, embed. You know, if we formed a relationship with delegates, both in the lead up to and of course on the day, it would seem natural to provide something that can support them long after the mood in the room has passed. And I don't think that we as speakers, well, let's be specific, I don't think I did a good enough job, you know, helping delegates embed the learning post-event. Whereas now, you know, I'm providing short little links, little videos, review videos from the sessions, recommended reading lists, supporting articles, practical toolkits for how to apply the key messages and embed the learning, you know, back in the workplace or back at home. So there is no doubt, it's a whole new world for both the speaker and the delegates. As I said at the start, we've been disrupted. It's a time to adapt and flex, pivot, and then some. So I'll finish with a phrase that was given to me many years ago, which without doubt has had the biggest impact on my development as a speaker. In particular, it's helped me tremendously when faced with difficult situations or difficult audiences. I'd repeat it to myself like a mantra while thinking about my next move. And it went like this: there are no difficult audiences, just inflexible speakers. That's it. My COVID-19 updated version reads, there are no difficult audiences or communication platforms, just inflexible speakers. I'm certainly looking forward to the ride, and I'm looking forward to seeing you next week at the live panel discussion. See you there.
Thank you very much indeed to Jim Steele there, and Jim is waiting here, as indeed are all the speakers, to answer your questions, which we've got some coming in, so that's excellent. If there's anything you want to ask or a point you'd like to make, please make sure you submit that, and we can make sure we cover as many of those as possible shortly. Jim's area of expertise there is very close to my own heart as a facilitator. Not being able to see your audience, not being able to judge the energy in the room is very challenging indeed. So perhaps we might discuss that a little more shortly. But next up, Toby, who are we hearing from next?
Last, but by very no means least, is our own Sarah Baradell. Sarah is going to talk about branding. The importance of branding and design in traditional events is no less important in digital events if you want to attract your audience and spread your message. So let's hear from Sarah now.
Hello, and welcome to the Designing for Digital part of our webinar series. My name's Sarah, and to give you a little bit of background, I'm Live Group's Brand and Marketing Manager. That essentially means my role is split into two. The first part means I look after our own live group brand, and I look after our marketing materials, and I make sure that everything is resonating with you guys. So first up, I want to say thank you so much for joining us today. It means I'm doing a good job. The second part of my role is to make sure that every event we design as an event agency is designed with your audience in mind, to make sure that we bring digital design, graphic design, and audience insights together to make one awesome delegate experience. So obviously at the minute, the events industry, just like every other industry in the world, is shaking up a little bit. We're obviously transitioning a lot from live events and doing a lot more digital events. So what I want to talk to you about today is how you can take your event brand and transition that from a live experience to a virtual experience. So to start with, I'm going to run through the basics for designing an event brand, and then I'm going to run through exactly what it takes to transition that over to a virtual environment. So to begin, I want to talk about what it takes to build a brand from the very beginning. When we're designing brands, what we do first is we look at your brand guidelines. This is one of the most important steps you can take to make sure your event actually reflects your brand whilst remaining its own identity. If you make sure that you're experimenting with your brand guidelines, it means that your event is more memorable, and it also means that people are more likely to see it in your marketing, which means more people are likely to attend. One of the things you want to do is just make sure you really get to grips with your guidelines. Look through your color palettes, look through your images, look through your stock library, look through how you use your social media graphics on your social media channels, because this is going to show you how far you can push your brand. The second thing you want to do is make sure you really get to grips with your audience. Every single one of our events at Live Group looks completely different because it's tailored to a completely different audience. If your event is designed for 2,000 government finance professionals, it's going to look very different to an event that's designed for 400 graduates who are just attending their very first event when they're joining their very first company. We're still going to use things like wayfinding to direct people through the content. Your virtual event is going to have a ton of content on it, so you need to make sure that your delegates are moving between the content pieces as and when you want them to. We can use things like links and graphics instead of print signs and digital signs at a venue to make sure people are watching the right stuff at the right time. This is good for before, during, and after your event as well, and it just means that all of your content is landing with your delegates as you need it to. The second thing you want to do is make sure your graphics support your speaker content. When you're designing a physical event, it's so easy to create a massive stage set and put them in the center of it. But when you're designing a digital event, you don't have that luxury. What you want to do instead is take the budget you're going to use on that massive stage set and just make some kick-ass motion graphics instead. Really highlight their content, really talk to them beforehand and make sure that all of their content is being reflected in the graphics to make sure their message is really getting heard. The last piece of advice I want to give you is to make sure your event leaves a lasting impression on your delegates. When you walk into a venue for a site visit and you see a massive blank wall, it's so easy to create a 30-meter printed banner and fill it and create some awesome social media moments and create your massive stage set. But when you're designing for digital, things are a little bit different. You can still make all those impressions and you can still get all those touch points in, but instead of designing a massive printed banner, you're going to design some awesome banners across your website instead. Instead of designing a big shell scheme for a big exhibitor, you're going to give them a dedicated spot on your website that makes people want to click through and read all their content. Whatever happens, you just want to make sure you've got a team of creatives around you that are just as comfortable designing a 30-meter printed banner as they are designing a 16-pixel favicon for your website. So I want to make sure that you're putting all of your questions and comments in the box below. I'm going to personally make sure that all of your design questions are answered throughout this webinar series. So thank you very much for joining.
Great stuff. Thank you very much, Sarah, for sharing the last piece of the jigsaw for now on how do you present your design? How do you get your design looking great? Thank you very much to all of you for watching so far, and I hope that you've been submitting questions as you wish to. I can see that a number have come through, including one from we'll cover. We've got Sue Gold, a question from her, and a Rose White. No relation to me there, just to be clear, although my mum said she was going to drop in on this, so perhaps. Sarah, let me take straight away a question for you that we've had through. This is about how much time we should allow for design. So it's all important, I guess, isn't it, to make sure that your event has its brand and your own brand is well communicated. But how long does it take? How much time do you need to create something? Could I do it next week?
I mean, that's the thing. So we've obviously put brands together in 3 weeks before for events. We put them together in 3 months. We put them together in 6 months. I think the most important thing is that we just get involved as soon as the event comes into us. We want to make sure that our teams are looking through your guidelines and kind of getting to grips with your audience right from the very start of the event. So as soon as, say, Becky, for example, does the kickoff, she'll get us involved. But yeah, we could design a brand in any amount of time, just like Toby's budget question.
So how is there more people involved in sign off? I imagine, having spent a little bit of time in this territory, I imagine there's a lot of people that want to approve and clear and sign off everything. Is there more people now? Does it make your job tougher?
I think the most important thing is that if clients have got a lot of people that are signing design off on their side, just to make sure that there's just one person feeding those notes through to us, because the last thing we want is to kind of change a design and then someone else comes and said, well, actually, we want it to look like this. So as many people signing off as needed on the client side, as long as there's one person feeding through to us, that's the optimal design way to work.
So making sure that you have a single point of contact really helps in that, although that obviously makes the client's job tough. And I'm sure it doesn't work quite as simply as that in practice. In fact, I know it doesn't, because I've been involved with some of your previous events, so I know it's a challenge. Quickly, just dealing with Sue Gold's question. Thank you, Sue. She's asked a very practical question for us, which is, will this webinar be available to watch later? Sarah, you're in charge of the Live Group's brand as part of your role, so will it be available later, and where?
It sure will. It should be on our YouTube channel later on today, which is youtube.com/livegroup. We'll actually send an email out to everyone that's watched this today, just to make sure you can watch that as well.
Okay, great stuff. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you very much for that. Okay, we've got a bunch of questions. I'm just trying to look at them here as I speak. Good one for Bruce. Okay, Bruce, this one is, I quite like the beginning. Your architecture is nice, but what elements of a physical event can't be replicated in your expanded methods? So that's a really tough one, isn't it? How do you, some things can be clearly enhanced. One of the things Toby and I were talking about, Toby, we were chatting about that you could have that sort of, what I've been calling the big brother's little brother session, where you take a speaker to the green room and have a more in-depth interview for the home audience. If you have a mixed event, physical delegates have gone for a coffee, you've got an enhanced experience. So there's clearly some benefits of it, but which bits can't be replicated? So you and Bruce can answer.
I've answered that a few times. I'd like to hear Bruce's view on that, because he has been dealing with some very interesting architectures.
Can't be done in this format. What I would say is that some things are better suited to being emulated in this format, and some things aren't. So a very quick example of this is table working. It's a very popular thing at a given event. You've got a group full of tables, and you send anyone to work at the people at their tables, and it's quite successful in that in a physical event. As soon as you try and immediately transpose that into a digital event, you have people in many different video chats and things like that. It's possible and it's emulating it, but it's not good use of time. It's not a good use of technology. We need to go back to that first principles idea of what do we want? We want people collaborating, and go from there.
Okay, great stuff. Thank you. Thanks very much for that, Bruce. If I can follow up on that, because we had a question from, this is from Rose Wright. There you go, not White, Rose Wright. So this was about how you make panel discussions work. So we're demonstrating a little bit of that here today, but I guess one of the challenges of panel sessions on the digital event, we can use the live interactive technology fantastically to capture questions, but follow-up questions, which would be manageable in a room, are a bit tougher. How can we do that online, Bruce?
You have a good moderator, is the short answer. You don't rely on one person just reading it out and then not seeing subsequent questions that come in and take them. I think control becomes quite an important thing in this environment. So I know, and I'm sure you know, and I'm sure most of the people watching know, that it's very easy for one person in an event to dominate a microphone and ask a string of 1 million follow-up questions of limited use and utility. And what I would say is that if you have a moderator who's looking at that person as they submit a question via text, they can very easily see the other questions submitted by that user. Or they can not go to that. They can ask it if they so choose, and you have that moderator whose sole job it is to keep an eagle eye out for questions, but they can actually pick in the moment what's the best thing to go on to. And that element of control is something you do not have in a live event when you've got someone grabbing the microphone. Otherwise, you have that awkward PR moment where someone has to wrench it from their hands. So I'd say it's something that works really well in this format. It keeps things relevant, but you have to have a good moderator. And that's why we brought you in, Kieran, don't you know?
Well, that's very kind of you. And I would say, I often say to clients when I'm running an event, if you've got a few hundred people in a room and you ask the audience for questions, the first person, if you see a hand shoot up, that person's probably to be avoided for most of the day. I think anyone that's that keen to ask a question so early, whereas I think this is where the live interactive, the digital element really comes into its own, because you get an opportunity to have a think and put your question forward. And as you say, as a moderator, and indeed as a speaker, but as a moderator, you can see what's coming in, you can read the themes of those questions, and it really helps you, I think, to cover more territory and have a better discussion, better quality discussion. On that, Jim, I'm going to come to you on the speaker experience. So exactly that, you're on stage normally, as you were saying in your speech, in your presentation, your video, the nerves help, don't they? Looking into the audience, seeing the dynamic, it normally bounces off you. How do you do it if you're doing it at home? What's your tips? How do you help someone when they've got to do this from their own home?
Yeah, I mean, well, first you have to, again, just appreciate the difference. So I've just kind of explained that and fleshed that out a little bit. The tension's different, so you can't expect people to respond the same way. In fact, you don't even know if they are responding. And I want to pick up on something that Toby said at the beginning. I think I heard him say, lead with content. This has been a big shift for me. Leading with content, you know, I think this is the content-led format rather than personality-led. It's not good enough, like back in the day, to bounce around the stage with a few witty anecdotes and a bit of impromptu audience participation. This has to be thought through. You know, the discipline in this format is at a different level. And I love it. I love this format. I think it works even better in some regards because you can appreciate the whole room. And to your point, if one person asks the question, well, they're always going to ask the question, and usually at the expense of the others. Whereas in this format, you can really engage everybody. And you know, whether it's putting questions out to the room, you know, whether it's involving them in simple activities that can just take them by surprise. You know, I think, as I mentioned in the video, give them the content in advance and surprise them with the process. There's lots we can do, you know, to engage the room. But it's just different. It's a different way of playing the game.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thanks very much for that. And I guess, you know, getting yourself sort of revved up a little bit before your speech, I guess, is the key. Normally you get that automatically when you're about to walk on stage, don't you?
Yeah, I'm mindful of that this morning. I had a conference this morning, and you know, you're right. Before a conference, you spend an hour or two getting there. You're there an hour or two before it starts. You know, you're already kind of psyching up, ready for the moment, right? And the audience, to some extent, are doing the same when they're filtering into the room. Now, I'm on at 11. I switch on at 2 minutes to 11. Right? You log in, and I'm in my attic. Right? I'm downstairs chatting to my partner. I've had a cup of tea. I'm on now. Oh yeah, there's 500 people waiting. I mean, it's a completely different psychology. But listen, it's so important that you psych up for that you do actually take time. I spend a lot of time visualizing the way the session's going to go in my head, visualizing the audience that's out there. I put in exactly the same amount of prep psychologically as I would. And it's important. You can't just hit the ground running with this format. You've got to prepare, go in. It is still camera lights action, but it's just, you got to modify it and you got to pace them very differently. You can't just bounce in. You got to manage the energy they're in, which is they've just walked into their office and sat down, and now they're at a conference, right?
Great stuff. Thank you. Thank you very much for that, Jim. Okay, let's look at another couple of questions. Toby, I'll try this one for you. What are the options? This is from Amal Prasad, I think. What are the options available for group activities to engage an audience? Perhaps Jim might want to think about this as well. But Toby, let's go to you first with this. How do you run a group activity that might engage an audience when you're entirely online?
There are lots of ways. I think I think I get all emotional when people start talking about putting content first. It's what we've been talking about for ages. But yeah, it's thank you, Jim, for that one. It is exactly what we should be trying to do. Engaging audiences, again, as something that that we've kind of been in the forefront of for the last decade and some, and we've been using interactive technology to do that. It's something that we've witnessed recently. Our clients, going along the lines of an online platform, have asked their delegates to sign into something like, there's plenty out there, I won't name any, but asking them to sign into there, and then using an app on their phones to actually answer questions and Q&A. And the audience is very naturally going, hang on a minute, I'm sitting in front of a computer, why aren't I doing both on there? And it is actually a big fail, we've noticed. And so it's important to find a platform with, I hate to say ours has it included.
Oh, I'm sure, yeah.
To find a platform with this audience engagement technology built in. Now, one thing to mention about audience engagement is there's a lag. There's a lag at live events. There's a longer lag at digital events. We're finding we're only just getting all our questions in now, and we've got not long to go. We might extend it a little bit if people can hang on. We're seeing a lot of clients extending what they would consider their 2-day traditional event, and there's a big buzz term out there called festival of events, and they're running a festival of virtual events across a week, which seems to be quite engaging for delegates, because at least they can then think, I am going to be engaging with that topic, not 24 hours a day over a whole week, but maybe 2 hours here, 1 hour here, another hour at the end of the week. And what you can do is you can ask them to engage with activities outside of the listen mode, so they can then zoom off into a table session via Zoom or via Teams with a group of people to solve a problem that you set them. So yes, you can engage with delegates live with voting and free text. We could do that now, but you need to think about your events extending over a longer period and engaging with people in their downtime, as well as having lots of different things for them to engage with across a longer period of time.
Great stuff. Thank you very much for that. And I think that's interesting, because it brings us back to the whole purpose of a digital twin event, is that you can rethink everything. Yeah. Think about what you're trying to get out. You and I were talking before this started about there's some online conference technology where they replicate the physical moving around, so appearing at registration and then going to that room. I mean, it strikes me that that's the part of the conference which is the least useful part anyway. So I don't know why you'd replicate it, but I don't know, maybe it's helpful.
I'm seeing everyone on the Zoom call laughing at that. Yes, there are virtual events where they have a little registration desk that an avatar walks up to and says hello, and you get your virtual badge. It's the one thing walking around an event for me is the big waste of time. I want to go from content to content to content without having to do that kind of nonsense. We have been talking to clients about virtual exhibitions. I know you and I were talking about that before, yeah. And maybe allowing delegates to be guided through the virtual exhibition. That's an interesting notion, which can happen, of course, but something to be looked into further.
Yeah, okay, great stuff. All right, let's try and cover some more questions, conscious of the time. Let's go quickly to security and privacy question for Rob. So Rob, you are behind the audience platform and making all of that work for us. Some audience members may want to not share too much. Certainly, their prerogative, and everybody has their own view about this. Can we lock down security? Can people keep their cameras off, their audio off, not share data? Rob?
Well, we get asked this quite a bit, but we've got several controls we can sort of twirl. First of all, when any delegate finds another delegate they'd like to connect with, no personal data transfers unless the recipient, the person you've been contacted, actually allows that. That's the first thing. Now, if a user doesn't really want to be seen at all, they can opt to be anonymous. And that means they can see a lot of the contents through the different channels, forums, and so on. And in general, they wouldn't allow to be interacting. However, we can allow that. And in that case, what we would do is we would have advised moderation so that that keeps the topics on point and safe content. So there's a couple of controls we do have at hand to ensure that all your personal data is safe and allowed only by you to be exchanged. And that's sort of things like phone number and email address. We only pass that when you allow it. And then users can be totally anonymous if that's what they want to do.
Great stuff. Okay, thanks, Rob. I'm very conscious it's now 3 o'clock, so we said this webinar would run from 2 till 3. So if you do need to stop now and get on with something else, then we'll say thank you very much indeed for joining us. But in the true tradition of digital events, for those of you that want to stay on now, we're going to spend a few more minutes covering some more questions, and indeed you may, of course, watch this content later. Toby?
Well, it's not like questions don't overrun at a live event, do
Never.
they? So
not on my one.
We don't. It's not like we're going into coffee or lunch. We're sitting at our computers. So I think we can go another 10 minutes if we can.
Great. Okay, we'll be on. So thank you to those of you that do need to go, but hopefully you'll stick with us. So Rob, just picking up what you were saying about that security and what data is shared, we had a question in which is very specifically, can delegates easily communicate amongst each other on that platform? So there's some supplementary in there, visible gender direction. No, so can they? So delegates can. You mentioned it. They can talk to each other, or?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, we allow a chat, if you like, straight to the open forum. All those watching, and we allow users to one-on-one, again with permission, start a private chat and also create their own rooms if they like to have group chats that can be locked to the users that are in there being invited into that room. So we do indeed allow lots of side conversations and conversations to happen while the stream is on, and of course we encourage that to happen before and after the event. So we allow those tools and they're open to everybody to use in that way.
Great. Okay, very clear. Thank you very much. Becky, I just want to come to you on the whole planning of things. We've had a question about, with digital events delivered from people's home, should we expect more chaos? I mean, I don't know how much of that is the planning or how you plan around that so that your event works when people are doing this from home. Becky?
Sure, absolutely not. No such thing as chaos. If there is any, then it's always very organised. I think as soon as you enter an uncontrolled environment like someone's home, office, we understand that there's a lot of unknowns. We get used to the kind of safety of a venue or a studio, but we're finding the more and more we're speaking to speakers, they have very different home lives, different setups, different environments. Office is ready to go. Sometimes we're making makeshift environments in their lounge. So we can handle it, we can juggle it, but we just encourage a lot of pre-planning, a lot of technical checks with the speakers, and also allowing for pre-records, and just because we never know what's going to happen, like power cuts and failures and things last minute that we just can't plan for.
Great stuff. Great stuff. Thank you. Yes, and indeed, certainly as a facilitator and moderator, we certainly had to deal with a whole bunch of challenges when you're at a live event. So I'm guessing it's not too dissimilar with the things that you just get on with as you go. Quick few more questions. I'm just going to fire them out and we're going to try and wrap up fairly quickly. We had a question about costs for Marcus. So which is, what do clients say? What's the most difficult part to get right in the costs, Marcus? So where do you have the biggest challenge from clients when you're trying to cost these?
That's a great question. Do you know what? I think if we've done our homework and we've taken a really consultative approach to working with the client to understand the brief, in theory, it's not a hard process to build a costing model. I think one of the trickiest areas, and this links really nicely to Jim's video and his comments, is that when we try to gauge the amount of speaker support we need to build into budgets, speakers are very confident. They're used to presenting to live audiences. When we get into the planning and rehearsal, they actually realize that there are very subtle nuances between what would have been a live event versus a virtual event. And we find that we need to include a little bit of extra time to coach them, to brief them, and to help bring on their content.
Great stuff. All right, thank you very much. Thanks for that. I'm sure the difficult subject of costs, it's always on everybody's mind, isn't it? So challenging part of it all. A few more questions quickly. Toby, CEO buy-in. Do you need to go right to the top of the office to get agreement to this completely new way of doing things, or is it something that you run with your regular event contacts? Who's normally commissioning you?
It's something when we were looking at the greening of events, when we were looking at environmental strategy, is that you must get key stakeholders involved with the decision making from the outset. This is no different, and if you're going back to first principles thinking, to get that to ask those questions to the right people, why are you running the event? What are your key objectives? To get the buy-in at that level means a world of difference. And right back to what Marcus was saying, if you are then open up front with them about the architecture and the potential costings behind it, and the chief executive is on the line, there's going to be no nasty surprises later on. And I think it is vital that you get maybe not the chief executive, but certainly key stakeholders involved. Absolutely.
Okay. On that, you talked there about greening of events. One of the questions we've had in, Simon Lee Green has asked, should we calculate the environmental benefits of a digital twin? So, interesting question. Should you be actually trying to put down carbon emissions, or?
I think now with digital events and what we can measure and the data we can extrapolate, it's a lot easier to record the greening of events and the carbon you're saving. Much easier than if we were managing them before, when we were just trying to find the average footprint of the average delegate going to the average event, and someone was offsetting that by planting a bunch of trees. It kind of didn't really cut mustard for me. This now we can actually track and measure what was happening before and what is happening now. And when we do get back to a hybrid approach, when small audiences can meet together again, then I think it's going to be a lot easier for us to really measure the impact of what we can do with this digital architecture around the environmental impact.
Okay, thank you. And indeed, we've worked, you and I have worked together on events through the years where we've done exactly that, where Absolutely. We've had sort of remote audiences working together as one. So all doable stuff. Bruce, I've had a question in. So will we get to a stage where events are held in a full virtual world like Fortnite concerts? Wow, that is interesting. Bruce, what do you think?
I think the Fortnite concert is speaking to a very particular type of audience, and therefore the virtual format is very good for that. You know, you've got a load of young kids who would need parental permissions to go to an event. However, they can get to Fortnite with no problem. So I think that model is really interesting, and I think it's an idea of matching an audience with a content stream perfectly. I think that's where it comes to this idea of opening the toolbox for event planners, whereas this type of approach will become a vital part of that, and giving many pathways which suits both the audience and the world around us. That will be the key. That will be the future. I don't think this will replace anything. I think the types of events that people attend physically will be very different than the types of events that people attend digitally, but both of them will be driven by objectives thinking and not anything else, and that's only a good thing.
Brilliant. Okay, I love it. Thank you. I've got some questions now. I'm going to come to Jim on icebreakers and keeping audiences engaged, but to put them together with some other context. So one of the things, again, Toby and I were discussing just before we went live with this event, is the idea of digital twin events being able to be very personalised. So you might have a different journey to a colleague in your same organisation who's also attending that conference, depending on your interests. So rather than moving to breakout rooms, simultaneously just seeing different things, different exhibitors, etc. So that's one. The reason I share that is it's one of the ways that you might keep audiences involved and engaged, which is one of the questions we've had in, is particularly if we're running longer sessions, how do we lessen the drop-off in numbers between sessions by keeping people engaged? So I'm going to throw some of that to Jim with the other question, which was how do we envisage icebreakers working?
Yeah, okay. Jim. I mean, I think you're right. I think I threw a question out yesterday to a group. I said, okay, lockdown, what comes to mind? One word. About 500 people on the call. And within 2 minutes, there were probably 50 words. And it was everything from nirvana to hell on earth and everything in between, right? So to assume we're experiencing anything the same, right, it would be naive. And I think in this world, because everyone is connecting to the session, you know, the old school conference where you might have 400 people there, you could have a couple hundred dipping out at any one point in time, but not in this format. And if you don't get their attention, they will go. And it's easier to click off than walk out of a busy conference, right? So in terms of, you know, energizers, I think the speakers need to, once they've designed the content around different learning styles. There are visual learners, auditory learners, kinesthetic learners. So you've got to factor in learning styles to your content. Then you've got to trust your content, especially if you can't see them, right? You've got to trust that you've got the right content in play. And of course, you can get feedback loops through the, you know, these mechanisms, which is fine. But you've got to trust it to deliver it well. But I don't be afraid to work the room, to work the group. I was with again a session this morning. This was a town hall, very corporate, you know, 90 minutes, of which I had 45 minutes. And part of my session, I was talking about re-regulating the fight or flight response, right? How do you regulate the way you react to pressure and stress before you start solving a problem? Now, one strategy for that involves a specific breathing technique that special forces use, extreme athletes use, that you wouldn't normally talk about in a corporate conference. I wouldn't. But in this world, it's a bit different. People are willing to take on, you know, personal development strategies because they've experienced this in a very personal way. And I, you know, I could just explain it to them and articulate cognitively how it works, but I went, let's do it, right? I don't know if they are doing it, but I'm going to trust the room is with me, and I can like try this, sit up a little bit, let me explain the process. Let's all do this together. We'll get some feedback afterwards. You know, you've got to manipulate and work the room like you would before, but it takes a lot of confidence. You've got to have a very specific strategy, but the feedback afterwards consistently is they loved getting involved. You can psych yourself out thinking they don't want to. With a normal room, you can see if they want to, but now you just got to expect the best. If you trust your content, you know, work them, engage them, make them do things, you know, that's relevant to what you're trying to talk about.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much. And the questioner that put the question in actually said, well, maybe something like a Joe Wicks session, which exactly what you say, talk about trusting. He has like 250,000 people he's trusting to do his PE lesson. I quite enjoy his...
You've got to pre-frame it. You've got to say, look, I know this is odd. This is unusual. I know you're sat on your own, right? However, I'm going to ask you to do something that might seem a little strange, but there's method in the madness. You've got to get good at inoculating resistance and pre-framing.
Great stuff. I love Joe Wicks's encouragement, even though I'm doing a really bad job of it. He's always telling me I'm doing great, so I'm going along with what he says. Toby, you were going to come in on that.
We're working with Anita Howard, who runs the ICE Awards, and I'm mentioning this because awards ceremonies turning digital are difficult, and to try and sustain that feeling that you get where you're coming together to share great moments and success of what you're doing. She's sending out very personalized packages to all of the people who are watching online, and she's going to send out a different little package on the weeks run up to the event, where she's running a festival of events. And so at the award ceremony, they'll have a little cocktail shaker with a drink in there, and they'll have a bread roll and some food that they can make. And they're kind of opening all this as they're going through the awards. So I think there are lots of ways and lots of clever ways that you can create this feeling of oneness and this feeling of a personal approach.
Great stuff. That sounds brilliant. I'm working with a college on another project, and they are looking at sending kits home so that you can join in learning and actually be physically creating something, so everyone's got the same kit knocking around at home, which sounds brilliant. I love it. Okay, I'm going to wrap up now. I'm sorry that we didn't get to all of the questions that we've had. I think we've covered most of the key themes, so I hope that you felt that you got your question across. However, if you do not feel that, then you can let us know. So on the screen in front of you, you should have a box with your comments and feedback. We are very keen on your feedback and evaluation. We are also very keen to hear about any other event points, topics that you'd like us to cover. I think the big message, Toby, I guess you'd agree with this, is please get in touch with the live group if you've got questions about your own events. Love to help, love to talk to you, give you advice and guidance, and hopefully send you a proposal. But please get in touch.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, anytime there's live, hello at live group. I'm looking at Sarah now. Is that the email address?
Thumbs up.
Absolutely, thumbs up. So if you need to get in touch with us, please do. We're very happy to talk. I'm just happy that we seem to attract a decent number of viewers to these things. I know there's a lot of noise and a lot of virtual stuff going on. So thank you very much for everyone who's watching. I'd also say thank you very much to the panel who have been sitting patiently for maybe a couple of hours now. So thanks, guys.
And thank you very much. Thank you very much from me, for everyone that's watching. Thanks again to the panelists for great videos and for dealing with all the questions. We look forward to seeing you for the next one. So follow us to find out what it's going to be about, or tell us what you want it to be about, and we'll join you then. Thanks very much indeed.